Welcome to another episode of the JustUs Podcast. For now, I'll only be here with Tobs 26.
Hello, everyone.
Today's subject matters will be on X-Men First Class, Beast Machines Transformers, and Power Rangers Dino Charge. And now let's go over the first subject matter, that being X-Men First Class. So, back in 2011, whether you saw this as a reboot or a prequel to the original X-Men series, you have to admit that Fox certainly outdid themselves with a very impressive film that I think many people don't see the appeal for. I mean, sure, we live in a time period where we have all the MCU stuff, where we have things like the Snyder Cut and whatnot, and fan service, but I kind of miss this time period where comic book films were more about experimenting with the IPs, and we're not just trying to make a quick buck like they do nowadays. So, in the case of
Yeah.
X-Men First Class, they did a tremendous job with the film itself.
Mhm. Yeah, like you said before, it was the start of a new era, either for the genre or also for all these movies about X-Men and Fox inside. So, yeah, it was the foundation of a whole new type of portrayal of a lot of characters and putting them together and setting up the tone of what all of this would be.
Yeah.
I found it very interesting. You also got a taste of that in the previous trilogy,
Yeah,
but here it just feels fresher, I'd say.
I think whereas with the original series, it was more about the action, and it did have character development, sure, but I think it was more focused on like being an action movie, whereas this film felt much more intelligent. Not saying that the original trilogy was rotten or anything. Of course it's not. All I'm saying is that like this film just feels more thought provoking, a lot more thought provoking than the original trilogy.
Yeah. And also with more realistic topics at times, where you could actually transport yourself into the characters and you could see how their griefs and pains and dualities were going and how they were experiencing and how they were challenging themselves all the time. So yeah, you could feel that a lot of times. Maybe back then in the early 2000s, it was more common to see characters that were two-dimensional, let's say, especially coming from a comic book movie. But here you can see that they have a lot of layers into them.
Right. We especially get to see that with the cast here, where, while the original X-Men cast was great and iconic and nostalgic, they certainly didn't have the same level of character development that we get with the new series, or the then new series, like the younger cast for the prequel or soft reboot era of X-Men. Like, they just feel much more complex, they feel more thought-provoking. They're pretty much crucial to the story in terms of where they see themselves as mutants. Especially when we get to the iconic scene of everyone being recruited. Well, aside from Wolverine, he just told them to go fuck themselves.
That was fair.
But I think what I liked most was the portrayal between the two heads of the mutant group, Charles Xavier and Eric Lesnar. Because while we did get to see their relationship as friends or former friends in some ways back then with the older films, here it seems a lot more fleshed out and gives them like reasons for you to see one another. Because while their ideologies are different, you can definitely see why one would be correct and the other would be as well. But neither of them are 100% perfect.
No, exactly. I think it both they have their own mindsets on what they want to do and how they want to solve this problem about the mutants and how they're viewed and presented to the world. So obviously you see that Savior going for a more political and undercover method. He's most of the times confused and asking himself questions. And then you have Magneto, who comes from this background where he obviously has all the right to feel this type of revenge towards humanity and how cruel it can be, and feeling more of him being part of the mutant race over the human race.
Yeah. It's like it's just so well done. It's just so organic. And compared to most villains who pretty much have petty reasons for being like hateful towards others, I mean, there's a chance there might be a movie where one guy wants to go against anyone else just because he doesn't have any friends. But Eric is more than that. Like, he's got, as you mentioned, proper reason for him to go against the human race. He's especially disgusted with the way they see him and everyone else. But more importantly, like, he definitely shows off where his power can be, because he has his power to change the world, yet he refuses to use it because of who he's against. And it's done so wonderfully with X-Men First Class. I think even better than with Ian McKellen's Magneto, because I like Ian McKellen's Magneto a lot. Even if it might not have the same level of attachment I would with Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2. But his character development is nowhere near as impactful as what we got with Michael Fassbender.
Yeah, he defined a new era and a new face or image for Magneto. He like when you think about this experience, Magneto, yeah, of course you think about Ian McKellen. But when you think about Magneto, I think that it's more common to see Michael Fassbender.
Yep. But I think the true standout performance in a way was like the fact that both of them were trying to use Mystique, each with their own different purposes, because I like the way that both of them are very distinct from one another in terms of how they want to use her. Even though she can easily like say no, but the fact that she's made this sort of friendship with both leaders of the mutants puts her at odds with her own purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, she has this duality where she needs to decide whether to go to the place that she got welcomed for the first time, or go where she feels she will be more welcome for the rest of her life. Which would be like a world where mutants are far more accepted, either through force or not.
And more importantly, like it's also about how she sees herself, because you already know for a fact that she has this shape-shifting ability, and we especially get to see the way both Charles and Eric want her to see herself as, because Charles wants her to fit in with society. She can do that very easily, but at the same time, Mystique is curious about who she truly is, and when Magneto sees her nude, scaly body, he thinks that she should value herself more. She shouldn't be afraid of who she is. Never be ashamed of who you are, as Norman Osborn would say, but he's in a different Marvel movie and is dead.
Yeah.
It's also very well done, and you can pretty much say that Mystique in the later films after, like starting with Apocalypse, may have not been the best. Hell, she wasn't even really that useful for Dark Phoenix, I think it was. But here, and especially with Days of Future Past, she felt much more interesting, much more worthwhile.
Yeah, you get her introduced in a way that you feel much more than in the rest of the movies. and it's the first steps in her adult life. So yeah, I don't know how transcendent it is afterwards. I mean, Days of Future Past, of course. She also has her protagonism, but I also feel that their Wolverine gets a lot of screen time. So here it's the time for these three pillars to get their spotlight.
Yeah, I love Wolverine a lot from the X-Men films, especially Hugh Jackman's performances, like inseparable from the character, far more than anyone else, I'd imagine. But I do agree that having him be sidelined in favor of the like Charles, Eric, and Mystique dynamic helps the film a lot more.
And it feels justified, and in a matter of time, it feels okay, and you can actually focus very well on the characters that you're given. And I don't know, knowing that Wolverine is probably the most charismatic one, maybe secluding him a bit is for the sake of this new narrative.
It also allows them to flesh out the other characters, which I have to say, uh, I remember seeing this guy Optimus Prime, pretty much try and go against something like the film just because there was no uh, there was no comic accurate cast for the film, and I'm just thinking to myself, dude, are you serious? Like, just because the cast isn't comic book accurate doesn't mean you have to shit on the film. It's like, come on now. Like, he even made like this sort of I think it was a change.org petition to boycott the film because the cast isn't comic book accurate, and I'm thinking to myself, like, where's that energy for the Avengers? And
I don't get it.
hell, where's that energy for the Justice League? Just because there was no Green Lantern or no Martian Manhunter, it's like, who gives a crap? Did the X-Men cast from the other adaptations remain the same?
Yeah, I think that's a common misconception around, well, not only the geek culture, but also now the general audiences, because it has become so massive, this view on comic book movies, that, yeah, these old narratives are still continuing and even getting stronger sometimes. But comic accuracy does not represent quality in the product at all. It actually it's just like a plus, you know. If it is comic accurate and great, you know that one part of the audience is gonna be satisfied, but it is not the priority, and people should not assume it as the priority.
Right on. Right on. And like, and we especially don't need that when you have stuff like Magneto putting on his helmet and preparing to inject the coin towards the guy that he was after. He wanted him dead, and the way he like stabbed the coin through the guy's head was just like masterful. Like, that's the kind of Magneto we were hoping to see.
That fucking third act stops your heart, and it also breaks it. It's so sad, because up to that point, I didn't have any clue about what the fuck happened between these two. But now you see all of that friendship building up, only to feel this betrayal and this sadness. I don't know. I could really feel it.
And more importantly, like, it even shows off a scene where we get the two of them splitting up. Like, the way he pretty much gets poor Charles in his paraplegic form or his paralyzed form, from the legs down, was emotional because these two were friends for so long, and now he's pretty much saying like that he's proving that he's done with him. Like he doesn't want anything to do with him anymore. It's organic. It's got layers to it. You get the feeling that these characters are not going to have the same connection that they once had before, especially now that they're going to separate ways. And even with Mystique joining Magneto, it's brilliant.
It's brilliant, yeah. It's brilliant.
Overall, I have to say that X-Men First Class was a very well put together film, and one I have to give a lot of credit to for Fox, because in a time period like this where people expect things like super comic accuracy or Easter eggs or all these like constant action scenes, which to be fair, there are other comic book films out there that have action scenes that are bigger and more epic, like the first Captain America movie, the first Thor movie. And if you want to be interested in something like that but want DC, you got Green Lantern.
Yeah, I think a 5-year-old would be interested in Green Lantern.
Do we really have to talk about it?
Your laugh said everything.
Yeah, forget Green Lantern. Let's just move on. But yeah, X-Men First Class is actually really good. I'm glad we got it sooner than later, because I don't think we'd get anything like that unless it was...
Wait, although Matthew Vaughn hasn't been too kind with Zack Snyder, I will still give that a pass and say that his movies are very good.
To be fair, you can separate the art from the artist, because the art here is masterful, whereas the artist, on the other hand, sucks.
Unlike other people who are fucking badass in real life, like Zack Snyder, and also makes badass movies. Just let me say that.
Yeah. And of course, we have people that are a similar example to Matthew Vaughn, but for different reasons why we hate them, like Bryan Singer.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Let's not go in deep.
X-Men First Class. Cool beans. Next up, we're going to be talking about Beast Machines Transformers. This is a sequel to the original Beast Wars show, a direct sequel. And considering the fact that Transformers shows didn't really have sequels as often back in the 80s until nowadays, unless you're in Japan, where they make a shit ton of sequels, and none of them are good for Generation 1. Beast Machines was actually the first time we ever got a direct continuation to a pre-existing cartoon that's more directly tied into it. Like, you could say Generation 1 and Beast Wars were connected, but that was like a massive gap between Beast Wars and G1. Even then, we don't know exactly what version of G1 that Beast Wars is connected to, because some details are different from both universes. It's like a combination of both that and the Marvel comics. But Beast Machines? Beast Machines is a full-on continuation of a story, and what a surprising one at that, because we see the characters, the Maximals, running away from the Viacon forces at the beginning, with no way for them to transform into the robot modes or defend themselves, so they have to avoid the Viacon army. The only survivors are Optimus Primal, Cheetor, Rattrap, and Black Arachnia. They have lost the rest of their allies that came with them back to Cybertron. And as they discover, they must learn how to obtain their new techno-organic bodies from the Oracle, learn how to transform spiritually, and go against the technological in hopes of making a balance between themselves, the organics, and the machines.
So, what is your general opinion on it?
Well, at first I was in a mindset that Beast Machine sucked just because it sucked out all the energy from Beast Wars. Because when you think about it, Beast Wars was a show that was very, like, it had everything you'd want in it: action, character development, humor, heart. Whereas Beast Machines felt more serious. It kind of made you question the way the characters were written, especially with ones like Silverbolt and Rhinox. Hell, even Megatron and Optimus Primal might have been questionable, and to an extent, Rat Trap. So, generally speaking, most of the characters are the same from Beast Wars. I'll mainly go over their differences beyond their designs. Optimus Primal is still the same gorilla maximum leader, but this time he's very obsessed with going against the technological and making Cybertron organic as it once was before. However, he learned from his mistake and must realize that he must make a balance between the organic and the technological, because as it turned out, Cybertron was once an organic planet before it turned metal. And upon discovering the fact that the seeds of the future lie buried within the past, Optimus Primal must create this balance and go against Megatron, who's obsessed with the technological and hates the organic. Cheetor, he's much older than his original self. He's not really the same sort of wide-eyed kid appeal character, but he does eventually have leadership capabilities, especially when Optimus Primal dies at the end of Beast Machines. Spoiler alert for those that still haven't seen the show. Rat Trap is the same guy, but now he's gotten a lot more. Well, I don't want to say the word. I don't want to make it sound offensive, but he looks a lot more disabled than he originally was. Because Rat Trap in Beast Wars has his own independent design. He has all the typical design attributes that everyone else has. But here, he has wheels for legs. He's a lot more down to dumps with himself, for the most part. And he loses that sort of snarky look to him in favor of having a more depressed-looking face that looks weirdly human-like by comparison. It's like they're two different characters. Hell, I think most of the Maximal designs make them look like separate individuals from their Beast Wars counterparts. Like, they carry almost nothing from their original forms except for the beast modes, but even then they're more alien-like by comparison. Especially for Black Arachnia, who went from a fairly robotic but still a female-looking robot that has black and gold for a color scheme into what looks like an Amazon goddess with a maroon coloring to her.
Yeah. So it is weird if you see first Beast Wars and then these.
Yep. I should mention that Black Arachnia in this case is a full-on Maximal, losing all sorts of her Predacon attributes during Season 3. And as a result, she's a lot more obsessed with trying to rescue Silverbolt when he got captured and turned out to have been one of the Viacon generals, which we'll get to in a moment. And the Maximals are fairly small in quantity, but they do get joined up with other characters. First, they meet up with Night Scream, who's not to be confused with Starscream. The character's okay. He looks like John Connor from Terminator 2. He turns into a bat. He's got that stupid hairdo on him. It looks like crap. And he's kind of annoying. But he does his purpose. His toy's ass, though.
Oh, yikes.
Yep, one of the worst Transformers toys out there, especially considering how bad the Beast Machines line was. But, moving on. We have Silverbolt, who turns out to have been originally a character known as Jetstorm, who in the context of Beast Machines, Silverbolt's spark was extracted from him and was placed into a Viacon drone that became Jetstorm, who has his own aero drones. Whereas Silverbolt was a sort of like Adam West, Batman, superhero type guy, Jetstorm was a lot more aggressive, a lot more egotistical and especially aggressive too.
Okay.
And then moving on to the Predacons, or in this case the Viacons, because the Viacons replaced the Predacons, we have Megatron, who is a lot more sinister in this series. In Beast Wars, he was pretty much theatrical. He was very, he's very much got that sort of feel to him of a big, characterful actor sort of guy as a villain. Whereas in Beast Machines, he's much more sadistic. He's much more tyrannical. He wants to get rid of his organic body parts. He wants to get rid of anything that is considered bad for his mechanical body. It especially shows when his alternate mode turns out to have been his dragon form from Transmetal 2, but with all the skin removed.
Huh.
Megatron will do anything to get into other bodies. I mean, at one point he took over the role of a beast named Noble, who can turn into a more dragon-like fiend named Savage. At another point, he takes over the body of a diagnostic drone. Then he takes over the form of Grand Mal, who is a giant head that can express itself, because Mainframe knows how to make the characters emote way better than Energon and Cybertron do. But the craziest form...
Okay.
Get this, the craziest form that he's taken form of was a replica of Optimus's optimal body from Season 3, without the beast mode, because he hates beasts. He's against animals, he's against the organic. Like, of all the characters that feel like the most natural in terms of progression, Megatron is the most fitting, because you get the feeling that because the Beast Wars have given him bad memories from the constant defeats, you pretty much see him as this big, tyrannical guy who wants to get rid of anything that stands in his way. And this Megatron is no laughing matter. Then we go to the other two Viacon generals. This one is named Thrust. He turns into a motorcycle and was once Waspinator. Whereas Waspinator was a sort of whiny loser guy who gets beaten up all the time. Thrust is very much like Jetstorm, but whereas Jetstorm has his ego to him, Thrust is a lot more he's a lot more focused. He's a lot more tactical in a way, despite having a friggin' wheel for legs. And he loses all of the loser aspects of Waspinator. By comparison, he's a lot more of a threat this time around. Oh,
so there are changes. Would you call them drastic changes at some parts, or no?
Yeah, mainly because when the three Transformers that became Viacon generals in the beginning of Beast Machines had their sparks extracted from their bodies, they become different people altogether, as Megatron wants them to lose all of their aspects from their original forms, which is why Silverbolt went from being the Adam West Batman type guy to being this sort of smooth dude. Well, and I must mention that Silverbolt turns into a friggin' I think it's supposed to be a some sort of exotic looking bird, and to a ninja looking guy who has chicken legs or digigrade legs and now acts like the Dark Knight. Well, not really the Dark Knight from Christian Bale's movies, but a much darker Batman sort of guy. Yep. But back to Thrust, he's a lot more aggressive and a lot more powerful than Waspinator ever was. Well, apart from the early episodes. And we have Tankor, who... Tankor was the one guy that people got upset about, because when people see Rhinox, they see him as this wise Maximal, and were horrified to find out that when Rhinox got his memories back, he doesn't want to help out the Maximals. He sees Megatron's point of view as the right one, and alienated his friends, especially Optimus. as he wants to get rid of the organic, but sees Megatron as a big detriment. Rhinox wants to take over Cybertron because he's the only one who is fully metal that has this sort of power. And the thing that sort of like got people really mad was when Rhinox refuses to help Optimus, and doesn't want anything to do with him whatsoever, because he's telling Optimus that if he doesn't think the way he's thinking, then he's not going to win the war whatsoever. Hell, there's even one point when Rhinox is back in Tinkor's body, pretending to be Tinkor to fool Megatron. He says, "We will meet again, Optimus, but not as allies," which shows his intent as a much more sinister guy. And that was certainly a big backstab for Rhinox fans from the original Beast Wars.
Yeah. Like, I'm trying to imagine myself being a fan of that character and seeing that alteration would be unsettling.
Eventually, Rhinox realizes his mistakes. Before he dies, he tells Optimus in the Matrix or the Allspark by saying that he may have not been thinking in his right mind, but he does see Optimus Primal as the right character or the right individual to set a better future for Cybertron. And that's the last time we see of Rhinox in the original Beast era. Well, of course, excluding any extended universe stuff from the comics.
Okay.
And we go into the more original characters for the Viacon generals, that being Obsidian and Strika. Obsidian is sort of like a replacement for Thrust and Jetstorm. He's the smaller one of the two, although Thrust was still around when those two got into the show. He does the job all right. Like, he and Strika kind of have this sort of like evil male-female duo look to them, which is somewhat common in Transformers, and most recently, in my mind, with Bumblebee movie Shatter and Dropkick, aka the two good things about that fucking movie. Strika, on the other hand, is kind of like a replacement for Tinkor, but a girl and somewhat smarter than Tinkor was, because in a way, I guess you could say she's like the she thing, whereas Tinkor is sort of like the Hulk in terms of his mannerisms, unless Rhinox took over his mind and started to be this sort of like ruthless individual by comparison. Now, as far as the show itself, I think it's a lot more serialized than regular Beast Wars was. Granted, there are moments where the series starts to have some episodic feels of it, but I think it manages to do a good job of handling its story very well, even if it mainly shows the Maximals running away from the Viacons, while trying to think of a next way to go up against Megatron. I do appreciate the fact that they changed some things up, because there's so many ways they can try to make the story feel repetitive, but they at least manage to change things up when we get things like new characters or revelations relating to Cybertron's past. And even when we get to the finales, they at least find some way to get viewers back inside with the new episode. And with season 1, it ended with Optimus Primal and Megatron disintegrating from the fight. But we get back to Optimus Primal realizing the error of his ways, and Megatron finding ways to get himself back into Cybertron, knowing that he doesn't want to give up the fight. So some might find the story a little repetitive in some areas, but I think it does a better job than people give it credit to.
So this show went down to the radar, right?
Well, I wouldn't really say that, but I think that fans complained that it might have been a bit too serialized, because it doesn't give new viewers a chance to catch up with everything. When you look at Beast Wars, you get the sense that you might know these characters from watching one episode. that was already there. Whereas with Beast Machines, it expects you to know who these characters are or these sort of attributes, even if you haven't seen the prior episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does a better job than people give it credit to. But that being said, I think Beast Machines is a strong show, but it's not one of my favorites of all time. I made a Transformers tier list, and well, it's not in the S tier, the highest rank. It does have a good amount of competition with shows that I think are good, but not 100% perfect. While I do prefer Beast Wars and other series shows like Prime, I think Beast Machines has a lot of respect going for me as someone that likes the more complicated story arcs. And more importantly, it doesn't treat its audiences like idiots, as we saw with something like the Prime Wars trilogy and Netflix War for Cybertron series. Also, the animation still holds up better than Energon and Cybertron do.
So, as a conclusion, not perfect, but not the worst thing ever. And it has some positives that you personally think there are there.
Right. Like, I still think the idea of Cybertron being organic ones is kind of weird because it takes away that sort of uniqueness of the Transformer race and kind of makes it sort of want to go back in circle with Beast Wars, where it's pretty much been organic beasts that turn into robots. Plus, the idea of techno-organic beings is cool, but kind of weird to pinpoint for Transformers because they're fully metal.
I understand that.
So it's just one of those shows that might be hard to exactly pinpoint why one would like 100% recommend it, but it's better than what people say it is. And finally, we'll be talking about Power Rangers Dino Charge. Now, since we're going to be talking about like the two regular and super seasons, I'm just going to crush it all into one and mainly focus on the quality of the season itself because I don't want to like get you too bored. Since honestly, while it's an enjoyable season, I don't think it's that good, especially compared to Dino Thunder.
Oh.
So, focusing on the characters, I think we have like a lot more characters than we really need to focus on. So I'll just say that the Red Ranger, Tyler, I like him. He's got some energy to him, but can be obsessed with looking for his dad. Coda, the Blue Ranger, he's a caveman. He reminds us about that too much. We have Shelby, the Pink Ranger. She's got a sort of like hip feel to her, but she's cool to watch and is also the girlfriend of Tyler. Black Ranger, Chase, he's Australian and he's a skateboarder. Green Ranger, Riley, he's like kind of a nerd, kind of an introvert, but cool to watch nonetheless. Ivan, the Gold Ranger, Knight of Xandar. We have Graphite Ranger, Sir Philip. He is kind of a reserved guy. We have the Aqua Ranger, James Navarro. He is Tyler's dad and hasn't aged because apparently the Energems keep the Rangers from aging. So they get to see the world end before their eyes. Oh, I went dark. Anyways, we have Purple Ranger, Miss Morgan. She is the mentor in a way. She does all the Ranger tech and was the second Purple Ranger within the season, as another guy, Albert, was the one that had the powers and was also an old guy. And finally, we have the Silver Ranger, Zenowing, who really doesn't do much. Villains are kind of an interesting thing as well. I mainly remember Sledge, Fury, Snide, and Curio, as well as Poisandra and Wrench. they're an interesting group of villains. Sledge is an original creation for the US, but yeah, they're kind of an example of goofy designs from some of them, contrasting the sharp-looking Dino Charge suits. It's a Power Rangers thing, especially a 2010 Power Rangers Super Sentai thing. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just going to go over the story. So, pretty much, we get the typical Ranger stuff where they have to go up against the bad guys. In this case, however, we build up to the team little by little, as usually we get to see the Rangers all together by the pilot. Here, we start off with red and pink, then we build up more with blue. Eventually, black and green join, as well as gold, and we build up the rest of the cast as we traditionally would, which 10 Rangers within the team is kind of a big juggle to deal with, but for the most part, they did a successful job at handling all 10 Rangers. Most of the story is just them trying to go after stuff like the other Energems, which is a fairly interesting story, even if some of it's filler. And Tyler has his own subplot of him trying to go to a quest to search for his father who went missing, and it turns out that he just disappeared and didn't even try looking for his son, which they didn't say that, but it kind of gives you the feeling that Tyler's dad didn't care about him. Season 1 ends with the Rangers destroying the command ship of Sledge. The villains have been disappeared, and we get to see stuff like Snide take over the villains, and the Rangers getting all these power-ups and going up against all the monsters before the finale ends with them losing the planet Earth from a black hole. So they go back in time, they wipe out the villains, and they go back into a present time where, because a meteorite didn't wipe out dinosaurs exist in their world. Which, let's be honest, as cool as dinosaurs are, that was stupid. Yeah. Now, you might be thinking, wait, wouldn't that affect the other Dino Rangers from the universe? And at first, you'd pretty much be correct that it would, because at one point, Mighty Morphin and Dino Thunder wouldn't have existed. But it turns out that Dino Charge exists in another universe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Why do they overcomplicate things?
Yeah, like they could have easily said that this is in another universe. I mean, we already know that RPM exists in a different universe, because things like that, like the RPM universe and the Dino Charge universe, can't connect with the main PR universe. Like RPM is in a post-apocalyptic world going against a computer virus. You can't go from that to Samurai that easily. The world would have to recover immensely. And as for Dino Charge, you would pretty much piss off a lot of fans that cling on to this universe, because people love you obviously have people that love Mighty Morphin, but you have people that love Dino Thunder especially, and if you lose the impact of Mighty Morphin, then you lose the impact of the rest of the universe. So that's pretty much a big L on Saban Brands until they said, okay, Dino Charge was in this world, and they even mentioned that in the crossover for Ninja Steel. Holy fuck. Saban Brands. I'm glad you guys are out of here. Let's instead talk about the quality of the season. If you remember when I said about how Samurai was so, because it had decent moments but felt flat. Dino Charge, I think, holds up better, but I don't think we're quite there with the best sort of character development we were hoping for. The problem is that there's just a few aspects where it feels like filler, or the way they represented the characters, they just make them feel too written for specific morals of the days. And of course, Supercharge relied so much on filler that you kind of forget that they're supposed to be on the quest for the Energems, especially the Dark Energem.
Mhm.
And as a result, we get a strong first season for Dino Charge, where it knows how to focus on its stuff properly. Apart from the finale, where the Rangers just, oh, we're going to take a break. We're not going to look for any other villains from Sledge's ship. And Dino Supercharge, where the characters just go to Fillerville, even while looking for the Dark Energem. So, is it a bad season for that? Not really, but it is a letdown since people were overly praising Dino Charge at no end. And while I'd say that it is way better than Samurai, Megaforce, and Ninja Steel, it's still far away from the same level of quality we got from In Space to RPM.
Okay. So going back to a tier list, it's like, let's say in the middle.
Yeah, middle top, give or take. Because the first half of Dino Charge, I thought was pretty solid. The second half, Dino Supercharge, was not so great. I also have to mention, why all the constant power ups? They gave him like two cockpit modes for the Megazord, and it kind of got really stupid. I mean,
Well, we have those arguments and debates of power-ups in all series. So
Yeah.
Power Ranger is no exception.
that is true, but in this case, they definitely pushed it forward, and it kind of gives me the feeling that instead of putting their budget in on all these upgrades, they should have put in the budget on making the show feel a little more refined. Like, I don't know, maybe we're just having too many high expectations for a show like that. It's just that I've seen better. But that being said, Dino Charge itself is not a shabby show. I like the characters. I like the better focus on the story without using too much of the same fluff that we got with Samurai and Megaforce. And I have to agree that with other fans, that it is nice to see Dino Charge remain present somewhat because the season itself was given attention with Ninja Steel for Dimensions in Danger. We had to team up with Beast Morphers. It's gotten some representation in the Lightning Collection. And Heckle, who was an alternate form of Snide, has a bit of a cult following as he appeared in the comic books and became the Dark Ranger, an unadapted version of the Death Ryuger suit that was not in the show proper. Yeah, it might not seem like much for those that aren't fully aware of the series, but it is kind of a neat thing, and I guess we could say this about Dino Charge. Not great, 100%. It is good, but I don't hate it. It's certainly the best Neo-Saban season out there, and I'd say it does alright for what it does, but that's not saying much when I say that it's the best of the Neo-Saban. And that about does it for today's episode.
Okay, this is Sayonara.
Yep, we'll see you guys next time. Might have been too short, but until then, take care.